You think you're a great dad because everyone keeps telling you so. Your friends see you playing with the kids, her friends call you hands-on, the whole world, well, they're clapping. Your wife, however, is the only one who looks underwhelmed. And she may be the only one who can see what you are still missing. I'm Alessandro, and this is Shut the Fuck Up and Listen, the podcast for men who are done with boy patterns, ready to take radical responsibility, and want to become the husband and man that their family actually needs. Today I sit down with Alex Trippier, parenting and relationship coach and host of the Be a Happier Parent podcast. Alex loved being a dad, and everyone around him thought he was brilliant. But inside his marriage, resentment, it was growing. His wife was asking, why am I doing everything? And he was asking, why does nothing I do count? Then Alex watched his brothers and closest friends. They had exactly the same fights. So he started reading books about motherhood, and he realized how much his wife's experience he had actually completely missed. So in this episode, you'll learn why defensiveness keeps you stuck, how invisible work quietly damages a marriage, and why playing with your children is not the same as carrying the responsibility for your family. Stay till the end as Alex uncovers the one voice he has been missing his entire life, and it changes the way he understands shame, fatherhood, and the man he's still becoming. You're going to enjoy this one. I loved recording it, so enjoy. And welcome to the podcast, Alex.
Hello, mate. Thank you so much for having me. This is awesome.
No problem at all, mate. You're in the nice heat of England right now, and it's a beautiful day, right? So I want to get straight to the chase of this. Essentially, I love getting you on the podcast because selfishly, I'm about to go into a really interesting period in my life where within the next, who knows, 1 to probably 7 weeks, I might have, I will have a little baby. And that is where you specialize, where you actually help young couples, specifically in that period of life. Because as we just had a chat on just before, in our little intro before we press record, that period straight after having kids is like one of the highest rates of divorce out of any period. I think it's even 1/3 of all divorces happen in that period. So what I'd love to know from you, number one, is what made you jump into this sort of space?
I loved being a dad, still do, but I love being a dad with young kids. I enjoyed it immensely. It was probably the thing that I've been best at in my life. I felt like I suddenly knew what I was doing, and like for the majority of people, it took a really heavy toll on my relationship, and there was a lot of resentment on both sides. From her side, a kind of, why am I doing everything? And from my side, a kind of, what are you talking about? Why does nothing I do count? And I came to a decision that's quite common, turns out, among men, that she was a control freak, and also that she was just determined to see the whole thing as stressful, and if she could just turn her frown around, she'd see that it was totally brilliant. I thought it was an attitude problem. And we got through it, we muscled through it, and things just do get easier when kids are older, because they're not dependent on you in every moment just to stay alive, and you get more space. But I started watching my mates had kids. I had kids quite young, had 3 by the time I was 30. And I realized that all the arguments everyone was having were identical, and that it hadn't been about me and Eloise. This wasn't about us. Like, everyone was having exactly the same fights, and it really got to me. And I was just, I need to understand. I need to understand why. So I started reading books about motherhood, and that's how I got into it, and it blew me away.
Wow. What actually made you make that decision to read books about motherhood?
Well, I was like, I know the problem. I can see the problem, that everyone's having the same argument. Where do I look for a solution? And
interesting there. So, but you were looking for a solution rather than continuing the same loops, right? Because there's a lot of people that I know. The reason I even say this is I think you and I both have similar trajectories, but for me, it happened before having kids. My wife literally was like, I need you to be more of a man or I'm leaving. And I know that we were having those same arguments, the same loops, and she was just very forward thinking, and she didn't want to have me as a father in that sort of situation. And so for her, what was almost like this, one person would call it an ultimatum. I actually called it she put her standards down in a line. Was there an inciting incident for you like that to actually make you go, you know what, I want to actually go and read books about this to end this? Or was there something pulling you towards that?
You know, the people who were suffering were people that I really loved. It was my brother. It was my best mate. And I could just see all these same problems that I'd been through coming down the road. And I think also I wouldn't say we'd come perilously close to divorce, but things had been rough. I'd gone into personal therapy and got a huge amount out of that, and realized in that therapy that actually I didn't get to put all my pain and problems at the doorstep of my relationship. I actually had, you're not going to believe this, I actually had quite a lot of my own shit to deal with, quite apart from my relationship. And in that therapy, I realized that actually marrying Eloise was one of the only true decisions I'd ever made. That a lot of our life we're on a conveyor belt of things that we should be doing, and we blindly get dragged along. But I'd made this quite odd decision to get married at the age of 25, and it was a really good one. And she was an amazing person. And then I felt it sort of became incumbent on me to understand, well, then why? I need to fix this problem that's still lingering in our relationship. We had a period of our life that we couldn't talk about without getting in a huge fight. We couldn't talk about when we had young kids because there was so much blame and disappointment there. So that was it. It's like, I need to figure this out for myself, and this is starting to affect people that I love very deeply, my brothers and my best friends.
That's beautiful to have that awareness. What did you find within these mother books?
So the first book I read was called The Motherhood Complex by Melissa Hoggenboom, and it was just sort of sat on that table. Everyone has a table in their house, right, where just all the crap mounts up. There's supposed to be just keys, and then everything just builds up. And it was there, and I was like, what is this? I don't know. It had a sort of pregnant belly on the front. Definitely wasn't written for me. And I was like, well, that's promising. And the second I started reading it, it was just really clear that this period of life, which I'd paid a lot of attention to, was completely different from the female perspective. That from the second my wife had become pregnant, she had been making decisions about, should she keep working or should she devote herself entirely to this life she was growing? But then, she wanted to be her own person with her own ambition, and this idea that she was two people. Like, we'd never once talked about the fact that my wife has been two people on 3 occasions. Like, not once. Sorry, I carry a lot of shame about the fact that I just really didn't look after my wife very well when she was pregnant. Interested in the baby and the bump and the kicking, and took no time to look after her and acknowledge what she was going through. And the conversation was pretty much restricted to, how are you feeling? And she'd be like, really tired. And I'd be like, well, you always say that, so no change then. That was kind of it. And I went along to the hypnobirthing classes, and I went along and I did all the stuff, and so I felt like I was doing brilliantly because I was ticking all those boxes. But I'd already somewhere internalized this idea that this was her thing. The care and nurture of children and was her thing, and that this family was really, really her thing, you know.
Well, I think you speak about there is actually a really dangerous seed, which I think starts then. It starts right then, because, you know, we don't get taught that as men, and it is, oh, well, it is her body, so it is her thing. But then if we play out where that leads, it's her thing dealing with postpartum, it's her thing breastfeeding the baby, okay? So, but the baby then just wants her, so I guess it's her thing when baby's a toddler too. And then she knows how to handle babies, so I guess it's her thing when the baby is now a young kid. And then I guess it's her thing when the baby's now a teenager. And so somewhere along the line, when did we think we were going to step up? Well, I think the answer is we probably never thought we were going to step up. We didn't think about it. We just thought somewhere I would, but... And I think that's really beautiful what you said there. It's just like this, it's just, you thought it was her thing from the beginning. But I wonder where that comes from. And also, I mean, sorry to dig in on this. Like whenever I talk to people and I feel something, there's a lot of emotion there. I'm interested in the shame that you feel. Why shame? If you're listening to the show, you're already asking the right question. How do I show up better? Maybe things feel harder than they should at home. Maybe you know something needs to shift, but you're just not sure where to start. Here's what I know. You're not lazy, you're not broken, you just never got the manual. Nobody teaches men how to be husbands. Nobody shows you how to navigate the hard conversations, regulate your emotions, or turn your marriage into an actual team. That's why I created Better Husband in 2-Minute Emails. It's one email every Saturday morning with one tool you can use that week. There's no therapy speak, no blame, just the skills that actually move the needle. 2 minutes, one Saturday morning, that's your entry point. Because 3 months of focused work beats 20 years repeating the same damn pattern. Links in the show notes. First email lands this Saturday.
I guess because, you know, we're talking about someone who's vulnerable, who needed me and was asking, not always, you know, it often came out as sort of very angry, but I pushed it, you know, I pushed it away. I wasn't there, and I didn't, on the day my daughter was born, it was on New Year's Eve, and I really thought my wife was going to die. She hemorrhaged, which still happens, right? Human birth just doesn't work that well. We've got giant brains and narrow pelvises. It's a bit of a flawed system, and it's still very dangerous. And all of a sudden, the room was full of doctors, and there was blood, and I was holding this thing, and I was just like, what's going on? And she didn't die, and all the hypnobirthing, all the classes and stuff that we'd done, you know, they made me feel like I had this job, and that was really great. I had this job in the birth, and I was part of it. And then in the ward afterwards, the maternity, the nurse came in and was like, you need to leave so that mum can get some rest. And my wife was like, are you kidding? Like, is he taking the baby with him? They're like, no, you and the baby. And they still do this, not always, but they still do this. They kick men out and leave women on their own after the most traumatic experience of their life, holding a baby that they've never, you know. And I didn't push back that hard. I didn't stand my ground. Deep down, I was like, yeah, that sounds right. Deep down, we always knew really this was her job. And I went and got drunk. And that was, you know, my first moments as a dad. I went to the pub.
I can imagine. I do an exercise when I do coaching. And I saw it, I first saw it, I think, with Stefanos Sifandos. He spoke about this. And it was that there's different things within a relationship that create these little micro traumas. And they create these little moments that we hold for so long. And when I coach, or you probably, if you've heard me speak on the podcast in the past, for people that listen, I tend to call these moments as like bricks that build up between a wife and a husband. And I can imagine in that sort of case, that was a brick. That was something that formed, probably was quite big between the two of you. And maybe even those fights that you said that you had, you know, from my experience within how women feel, they kind of feel in an infinite realm where, you know, for us, if something's wrong, it's from a month ago, a week ago, an hour ago, or in an hour to in a month. It's like the realm of the immediate. We don't really give a shit if it's outside of the month sort of space. We move on. But for a woman, it sits in her body. And when she's angry or sees the same pattern within you, she can bring up something from 1992, you know? And was that something that stuck with her, that moment within your relationship? And how did you get through that?
Well, I think, do you know what? That bricks analogy is amazing. Because when you're talking about why did I suddenly become obsessed with motherhood books? It was that. It was like, if I can understand this, I can tear those bricks down. Mm-hmm. There was a wall between us that we couldn't, you know, that we couldn't go back to talking about those years. And, you know, when I read that first book, I was like, I've got something very wrong here. I got something very wrong. There's a huge amount of power in that acknowledgement. When you can turn around to someone and say, I'm really sorry, I really missed some stuff and I'm starting to understand it now. And I know why you felt as resentful as you did. And here are some of the things that I'm realizing that I got wrong. And fuck me, does that feel good? Actually, in that moment, you know, to come together around that. You know, in the work that you do as well, like, our defensiveness costs us so much. It feels like protection. It feels like safety. It doesn't work. Like, it's not keeping us safe. It's keeping us stuck.
Well, you said defensiveness is really bad there, but the interesting thing about defensiveness is that you're trying to protect something. So when I talk about it, I always talk about it as like open versus closed behavior, because I think some men, they get defensiveness all wrong. They think defensiveness is like, I don't know, just being defensive rather than, and then they might rationalize something or explain something or have logic or something. But I just go, well, are you being open with your wife or are you being closed and trying to protect something? Because even what you just shared there, and thank you for sharing, it was huge, right? But even what you shared there, the pain that causes you to admit, right, later on, the pain to face that brick wall is so high because it's a large pain, right? You know that you've done something big, but it's so fucking hard to look back at that you would rather defend. And often it's like, I'm just defending from the pain of the shit I've done. And I was very interested in your shame because I had it in one of our coaching calls recently with a man talking about shame from all the years. And I don't know, I genuinely believe that it's okay to feel, but shame in and of itself, once it's done, we can't change the past. We can only walk forward, you know? You can only move forward. You can't get down on your hands and knees. You can understand, you can give love, and you can only let that inform who you are going forward, which I think is a really beautiful thing. Because if I look at what you're doing going forward, you're actively changing that, and not only for yourself, for as many men as you can, right? And couples. So, I mean, from man to man, I just would say the shame here is like, okay, it's beautiful, but it's at some point that you can't judge yourself anymore on it, right? Like,
Yeah, and I think it's moved past the point of being debilitating, and it's, you know, I think it's good fuel for me, and I just find it very hard to speak the words without them catching. because it's
course.
such a difficult thing to say out loud, you know?
Oh yeah, don't worry. I've spent time with a lot of men, and there's some deep shit that we carry. You know, we talk just in the sake of vulnerability, just because, you know, man to man here. Like, the worst thing I ever did was when Julia and I were on our way to get married. I invested like all my money into a company that I was building, and we were running out of money for it, and launch was coming up soon. So I started investing our wedding funds, and I didn't tell Julia. And overnight, when we launched, we got hacked on the launch and literally lost everything overnight. And it was 60,000 of my money and 100,000 of investors' money. So not only was my company gone overnight, but like literally all like our wedding funds as well. And so I carried shame around that for a long time. That was the thing that caused all of our shit. And I don't think I carry shame around anymore. I just look at that and I'm like, I'm going to make sure that never fucking happens again. And I'm going to make sure that I teach as many men as possible not to fucking do that shit as well. You know?
Yeah. I feel you.
So don't spend the wedding funds, and don't drink when your wife is
nearly done,
gone through the worst trauma that she'll ever fucking go through. Cheers to us.
Onwards.
But that's beautiful though. Like, so let's talk about alchemizing this. Let's moving that into it. You know, you have learned a lot about the feminine experience since then. What are some of the major things that you've learned that almost excite you to be able to share?
It's really important to understand maternal shame and maternal guilt, and that I think we're all really aware that the bar is lower for dads, but I think what we've understood about child development in the last 20 years, plus just a really bad mixture of circumstances, I suppose. At the same time, we've started to, well, women have always worked, but mums have moved into the workplace since the 70s in a massive fashion, and actually mothering on its own has lost the status it once had. So now you're just a mum. So now you're supposed to do all the full-time mum stuff, plus have a career and be a girl boss. And actually most families now are dual income because they need to be. So the bar has gone up and up and up on what parents need to do, but most of that has fallen squarely on the shoulder of mums. And there's no wins for mums. Like, for you and I to feel like a good dad, this is basically what we have to do. We have to spend more time with our kids than our dads did with us. We have to play with them. We have to not hit them or shout at them or lose our temper. We still need to pay bills, that's gone nowhere. And if we do a couple of things on top of that we've sort of internalized as usually women's work, like make a few meals or
go to the playground while all the other mums are there and it's you, the dad, right?
Right. We feel like we're smashing it if we do those things. And that's quite dangerous. Because I really had that from the universe. The universe thought I was a great dad, and I've always worked with kids. I'm great with kids, made a lot of money working with kids. All my wife's friends were like, oh, you're so lucky, he's so hands-on. So then I was like, what's your problem, lady? Like, everyone else thinks I'm amazing, and you are distinctly underwhelmed by my parenting. Mm-hmm. But comparing yourself to your dad or to other shit dads is not a good move. You need to compare yourself to what needs doing in your home and agree to what those things are and have conversations around those things. Because when I started reading about motherhood, the guilt, the shame, the judgment just poured off every page in these, they're called mummy memoirs, which is just a kind of disgusting term, but that's what they're called. Memoirs. But on every page there's guilt and shame and judgment, and that is just not what it felt like to be a dad. So being aware that that is coming at her, I think, is really, really key for men.
Yeah, I get that. I actually had a really, really kind of lovely experience this morning. A woman reached out to me from a magazine here newspaper here in Mallorca, and she wanted me to do an interview. So I did the interview, and she started speaking about her relationship because she'd been following me for a while. And, she said this really sort of haunting line. She said, like, the moment we gave birth to our daughter, I was just mum. I wasn't me anymore. I was just mum. And, he didn't notice that. He could just be him. He did everything that he wanted to do outside of that, but it all fell on me. And I asked her what would it take for her to let go of the resentment. And this was a big one because, just as much as we talk about men and women, one of the piles of shit that we all have piles of shit. That's one of the things you'll probably always hear me say. We both have piles of shit as high as a mountain. And yes, there are things that women can work on. But one of the things I think is like, we're all responsible for our own lives to some degree, right? And so I said to her, like, what would it take for this to move forward at least, for you to let go of that resentment? She said to me, all I need is just him to acknowledge it. I don't even need him to do anything else. I don't even need anything other than him to just see me and see the pain that I went through. Just to see it.
That is 100% my experience of what I'm getting back in coaching. And this is, all right, maybe the bar just remains low. No one is asking anything extraordinary of us. I've literally just come off a call where the woman's just like, I don't actually need him to take this stuff over. I just need him to see that, to notice that I'm doing it, to notice the fact that he can leave to go for a meeting on a Saturday without checking that anything else is in place. And if I were to do the same thing, I would need to make sure there was a babysitter in place, make sure the fridge was filled with food, just check all these things off. Like, why can't he see, to your point about what the lady said to you, that his body has remained unchanged, his career's remained unchanged, he's unchanged by fatherhood, and I've been completely altered. Why can't you just see it?
Just see it. Just see it. So I think if we're talking to any man out there, what does that look like? I mean, I'll say a few things and then I'd love you to share, Alex, what you think. But for me, what I think seeing it looks like is letting go of your version of the story and actually listening to her version of the story and assuming she's speaking the truth.
It's a biggie.
Trust her that she's actually speaking the truth from her experience and take that on and give empathy to that. I think that would be my first step. What would you say, Alex? What would you say is a way that a man can see this?
I think in quite practical terms, I love working with men who run their own businesses. Like, they get it much more quickly, like, than men who work in a corporation and work for someone else. Because if you run your own business, you know that nothing happened unless you did it. So if you start looking around your home and there's food in your fridge that you didn't buy, that your kids are wearing clothes that fit them and are seasonally appropriate, and you didn't order those, like, just start noticing how the shit that's happened because you didn't do it. Like, just in a really practical way. And if you start explicitly calling that out, it can just be a text message. It can be, doesn't have to be like, do you know what? I can't believe we're going on holiday and all the kids have new flip-flops because obviously the flip-flops from last year don't fit. Thank you. If you
I love the brand of flip-flops you got for the kids. That's cool. Like, that's presents, right? That's
Right.
literally seeing it. Fuck, I love that koala print you've got on that little clothes, or the dinosaur print or whatever. Yeah.
So it's seeing that the work that's gone on behind the scenes that is making your life work.
Mm-hmm.
And I just promise you from a completely self-interested place that if you start that kind of explicit appreciation, you'll start getting it back.
Oh,
And
yeah.
actually, one of the things that I think I'm hearing, when men get defensive about my work, it's like, I work really hard and your stuff doesn't acknowledge that. And it's like, well, why do you care what I think? Is your wife acknowledging it? Because if she's not, it's probably because you're missing something about what she's doing.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I wrote an email a little while back about this, but I'll share it here. I think it's as simple as I was sitting on the toilet the other day. And
inspiration comes.
You know when you know that you've got to like make sure you've like rechanged everything, make sure you put a new roll of toilet paper in and all of that. And the moment I sat down, just as I was about to wipe, like I was like, oh fuck, I did not change the toilet paper. I was like, shit, I'm gonna have to call her. I'm gonna have to shout. She's gonna have to like open the door and throw me a roll. And I looked to the side, new roll was already there. And I was just like, it was another one of those moments. It's just like, I am never going to be, maybe not never. Let me take that out. It's already changing in that. And I don't want language like this to be there as well. But I'm learning as well. But I am not even anywhere near the level that she is with her research, with the way that she cares about this home, with the way that a bunch of different things. But it doesn't require me to be. You need to be in the arena. You need to be in the arena, not just standing even outside, not even spectating, or even spectating, or even outside down by the pub. Be in the arena of your home. And even if she's better at it than you pick up the slack when she can't, which if you are in the arena, then from what I'm doing my best, because when we have a kid, like I just know that there's going to be slack that will need to be picked up because she can't. And I think that's the thing is I think we also forget as men is like, if we aren't there to pick up the slack, when she can't, nobody will. And life drops. And from what I know of my wife, even if she was, if I was the previous version of me, where I was passive, where I didn't see things or anything like that, and she was going through postpartum, kind of woman my wife is she would do all the things regardless of how much in pain she was, regardless of how depleted she was, regardless of the fact that she has an open wound huge in her body and yet she's still healing. She would be out there making sure that all the toilet rolls are changed. She would be out there doing that to make sure that the house is running. And fuck, that would be awful. I think men need to realize that. It's like, and was it you who posted this? Did you post that study about tell us about that, because that was brilliant.
Yeah, so when you said then, like, she's better at it than me, this is why. This isn't a kind of biological skill set. This is because she's the one who's judged when it goes wrong. And that's extraordinarily powerful. So we know that, right? We know that judgment and shame are these human things that make us act in different ways and often act in ways that are outside of our own self-interests. The argument we used to have was basically my wife saying, people are coming round and they kind of judge me unless this place is immaculate. And me being like, get over yourself, no one cares. Everyone's too into their own shit to care about what our house looks like. And what this study showed was that they gave people 2 photos, a messy room and a tidy room, and they told them this room either belongs to Jane or John, and then they asked them a bunch of questions. And what we learned was that we judge Jane much more harshly than John. Even when it's the tidy room, we judge it as messier when it belongs to Jane. And also that we can see John's room's messy, but we don't care. Like, he pays no social penalty. So they asked the question, like, what if a colleague or a family member were to pay an unexpected visit? What would they think about Jane Jane is less hardworking, less likable, less competent. She's basically like a less good person. John, he's messy, but it's John. He's fine, really, John. Like, so women carry all the judgment about what your house looks like. And I think when we can acknowledge that that's massively unfair, and we can be like, okay, it's easy for me to not care. I'm not being judged, but I love you. And I don't want you to go through that. That would be awful. It's really hard to try and explain what that would be. What's the equivalent for a man? I think it's got to be something like being unemployed, right? Or like, what are the things that actually men are very much expected to do? We're still not really comfortable with men not earning money, right? It's something on those. What would you say?
Yeah, it could be that. It could be like, what do you do for work? Oh, I'm unemployed. That's a big one. But even then, it's like, so I was thinking like, the small penis size is
right. Yeah, what makes you lesser? Yeah, as a man, and it's something like that. But it's just that's
something that's so not even applicable to everything that you do, right? I don't know if there's anything that's as universal. Which is quite benign otherwise,
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a big thing, right? It's just a bit of mess, but actually it's coming with all these kind of assumptions of character flaw.
Oh, I'd have to think about that. But that's a good question. But when I saw that and that study, I was like, that is such a wonderful way for men to understand it, because I think that's the thing. Consciousness, we are not aware of this shit. And when you see it in a study, it's like, oh, it's not just made up here. It's like literally people judge on different levels. So she is not just making it up. She's not just making it up. It's her internal feeling. Now, the interesting thing is, like, I always look at it like, because men then go, but why can't you just say that? Why can't she just say it like that and make it clear to me? Well, but she's not a fucking scientist and she doesn't know it. She just feels it.
I get a lot of flack from women online going, why didn't you just believe your wife? And I'm like, well, because at the time it sounded like her opinion, and it kind of was. And my wife felt just as educated and validated by that study as I was. That's why they did the study, because you want to take something that you think might just be a feeling and be like, oh no, that is a very accurate assessment of what is going on.
Well, the other crazy thing is, it's not just men that do that, right? It's women who also judge women, right?
Yes.
It's the fact that it's a societal understanding which gives different pressure. And so even when other women are faced in that, they are also going to be more judgmental of other women too. It's not just, it's like, that's the interesting thing. It's a societal difference, not a gendered difference. Which
on the judgment
even harder to handle. Whoa, got some deep topics we're talking about today there.
It's good, man. Not sweating the small stuff.
Sweating the small stuff. One thing I wanted to touch on, which I think is really interesting, is, we're moving now into more the societal understanding and all of this. And, you said something earlier, you said like you're seeing it in your brother, you're seeing it in your friends. And I remember you saying something along the lines of, this isn't personality or a character trait, it's a pattern. It's a pattern that's happening over and over again. How do we break free from that pattern? Do you have any idea?
I asked a quite famous campaigner over here, like, how do we raise the status of caregiving? I think this is kind of underneath it all, is that we as men we're not judged when it goes wrong. And when we do it well, we don't get that much out of it. So I'm thinking about an example of something like making sure the school teacher has a present, right? Which came up in my coaching recently. And this mum's like, I just asked him to do this one thing. And he's like, yeah, I forgot because it's not a big deal. And actually, for him, it's not. Like, it's not a big deal. He doesn't get anything out of doing it. And he's not judged when he doesn't. Whereas for her, it's the opposite. So how do we shift that? And the answer this woman gave was basically like, things go up in status when more men do them, which I thought was really interesting. So, when we change our behavior, when being a hands-on dad stops being a thing which is just about taking the kids to the park, but becomes about us managing the home and managing the household. As our behavior changes, the bar will raise and expectations will change. So we've got to drive it by changing our behavior.
All right, we're going to do it. You and me, Alex, we're going to build a universal husband and father score, and your score needs to be everywhere, plastered. And if your score's below 50, you don't get to do anything fun.
And should we just talk about what the benefits are to men as well? I think because maybe sure. I think that kind of the argument is very much stuck at the moment in this carrying the mental load.
Yeah.
Say again.
But why for men? Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Right, yeah. Because at the moment it's carrying the mental load is rubbish. You should do some too, which this might be true, but it's an appalling pitch, right? It's just like, that wouldn't get you through the door in any company trying to pitch like that. Yeah. So what the studies actually show is that when men take on more, when they take on more of the management side of it, when they're in charge of more in the home and they feel responsible, it does wonders for their mental health. It does wonders for their esteem. It really, really reduces the chances of depression. All the opposite is true for mums. As they take on more, it pushes them towards overwhelm because they're starting in a different place. But it's really, really good for us. And every man, when you ask him what he wants as a father, his answer is, I want to be better than my dad. And that can sometimes be like me. I love my dad. He did a really good job, but I can do better. Or it can be, that guy sucked. I know what I don't want to be, and I'm going to do better. But the question is how? How do we become better? How do we become, when our kids are older, the parent that they're really happy to talk to on the phone rather than just put mum on and we've got how do we build that relationship, that loving relationship? And we do it by being better carers, by making our children feel safe. And that is what mums are doing all the time with this anticipation and this planning and this research. They're making them feel safe, and we want that.
I have a huge belief in the benefit of it too. Is I believe that it helps our sense of purpose. I'm also speaking to a lot of men that feel purposeless. We're talking about male loneliness epidemics and things like this. Well, for fuck's sake, bringing on mental load, like your wife needs you for that. Your family needs you for that. There is a sense of purpose right there for you. And I think we neglect that. And in neglecting it and in jumping to things that are more satiating in the moment, numbing out on, the amount of men that come to me from just playing hours and hours of video games, which is already pulling them so away from presence that it's not funny. And then they're like, but I don't have a purpose in life. And I'm like, it's right in front of you. It's right in front of you. The depth of joy that you get from actually being on top of your household is unparalleled. When something happens and you know how to fix it, how to solve it, how to handle it, the confidence you get from that is unparalleled. You feel confident in your body, you feel confident in your skills, the self-esteem goes up, and you feel driven toward purpose. And the closeness between your wife, and then gosh, God forbid, the fact that everyone keeps talking about intimacy. I would do more in the household if my wife just gave me sex. Well, I'm sorry, it's the other way around. Your house and your life are like a garden bed of flowers, and if you don't fucking water it, there is no fruit from the flowers. So it's like, I think it's the other way around. It's this, why am I giving to this thing? Because this thing, is mental load, it's taking so much, but it's genuinely a garden bed. The more you water it, the more it gives you of confidence, self-esteem, purpose, of sex and intimacy and connection. And it's just that. It's the opposite to what...
I love that. And I think, the male loneliness epidemic is a care epidemic. when you're looking after other people, if we understood the fact that we're supposed to be carers, that we're natural carers, that all humans are, that the human story is not survival of the fittest, it's survival of the most collaborative, and that really we're the dominant species because we know how to look after each other. When men can start to understand that caring is a good thing, if you're looking after other people, you might be overwhelmed and exhausted, you might be frustrated, but you're not lonely. You're not lonely when people need you and they rely on you. You know, it's not all roses, but you are not lonely.
Not at all, you know. And I always have, like, I think there was this, it's so funny because it was a book that probably didn't intend for it to have a really beautiful, wholesome family meaning, but it did for me. It was a book, I think, Unbreakable or Unstoppable by the coach of Michael Jordan. So it's kind of supposed to be this hard-hitting motivation book. But he spoke about pressure, and he spoke about stress and pressure in this. And the biggest thing that he spoke about was that I took from it, was that you get stress, which I think a lot of men do. They get a little overwhelmed or whatever. But he thinks stress is the result of not handling the little pressures each day. So there's pressure each day, right? Life comes with pressure. You might have a full day of work, and then the washing machine breaks, and that's extra pressure, right? And you can go, I'll do it later, but then that compounds, and then tomorrow's pressure will also be on top of it, and then all of a sudden stress, because it's been left for so long. That's what he believes stress was. And so a man that can genuinely handle the pressure each day, right, it's a good thing. Because even think of, and this is what I kind of want to leave men with in terms of, because I loved your question of turning that towards the positive. Men who are listening to this, who would you rather be? Would you rather be a man that, when pressure comes knocking, your wife can't call you because she doesn't believe you can handle the pressure? Or would you rather be the man that she can call because she knows you would be able to handle pressure? And I love that, because that hits the internal challenge within us. And when I think about that, I'm like, oh, I want to be that man that can handle pressure. I don't want you to think, you know what, I'll call someone else because they can handle pressure. He can't. That gives me direction. What do you think of that? I don't know. That was just speaking.
Yeah, I thought that was really, you know, going back to what you said slightly earlier, that feeling of confidence and competence. We're talking about competence as well, isn't it? It's just like, I'm a competent person. I'm on top of my stuff. My wife can come to me. My kids will come to me. You know, talk about benefits. My 17-year-old daughter comes to me with her problems. That's just amazing for me. Like arguments she's having with friends, arguments. And that isn't because I've been this fun guy doing all the fun bits. It's because I built trust. I've remembered to buy the food that she likes from the shop. I've known when she's got a school trip coming up, and I've been planning for it. It's these things, it's these daily pressures that you're talking about that result in someone coming up to me and being like, do you know what, I've fallen out with, and I don't know how to handle it. What do you think? Mm-hmm. And we all want that as dads.
Exactly. And I think it's our measure of also facing fear. I think it's our measure of facing fear, because I see a lot of men like, and I used to be this. I'll say first and foremost, like I remember when only a few years ago, like I'd gotten through my whole life without needing to drive a car anywhere. Like I lived in cities, I could walk, and then in Bali, when I lived in Bali, I could just ride a scooter. And then when Julia and I went to Germany and moved to Germany, I had a driver's license, but I hardly ever drove a car, so I just didn't do it. But then that was also a thing that Julia just had to do because I wasn't necessarily good at it, right? And I was a bit scared of it, right? And I see it a lot, because men will also come to me, and the same fear that I had about just driving a car, they would have about like maybe calling new people on the phone, and it would have to get done, right? So their wives would be the one that calls everyone on the phones. And, you know, then when Julia and I needed to go somewhere in Mallorca, she was at the start of when we first moved here, she was the one who had to drive us to Mallorca because Alessandro didn't face his fear. And I think that's part of this competence thing as well. It's like, I think our relationships require us to also face our fears and become better so that we can actually streamline the relationship, because the things that we refuse to do because we refuse to do in like a fear, if they need to get done, your wife is the one doing them.
That becomes tricky. And this is one of the things that when I'm working with couples, I have to get us through. Because what you're talking about there is this thing where we say, well, you know, you're good at that thing, so you do it. But the reason she's good at it is because she's been doing it for ages and she doesn't want to keep doing it. So now we're going to have a bit while you do it, and you're not going to be very good at it. You're just not. So then there's this really tricky term, weaponized incompetence, right? Which sometimes is just incompetence. So it's
not always weaponized.
It's not always weaponized. Sometimes we're shit at stuff.
To weaponize it.
Yeah. Oh, I love to be able to weaponize it. So this is quite tricky, right? And there's a thing in corporate change theory. It's really basically like when we start to do something differently, we should expect it to go badly for a bit. And if we know that's going to happen, we'll stick with it and drive through to the end. But what's the difference then between incompetence and weaponized incompetence? And it really is, are you the person who's taking over that job? Are you a willing and able participant? Are you there being like, okay, no, I'm really going to listen. Tell me the way you do it. I might not do it exactly that, but I'm listening. Or are you eye rolling and being like, you're making a big deal of this? Like it's completely different. If you're taking on a new job in the workplace, you know how you behave when you're making mistakes, and you know how you promise and reassure someone that you're really listening and get better. And I see a lot of men not really bringing that kind of energy to taking on a new task in the home.
But I think what I'm also getting at here is just like, for all of us, even in that, I'll use the same story as I did with me, right, with this. Life had just sort of moved on, and I was kind of on that conveyor belt that you were talking about, right? And so we were just all of a sudden you just arrive at that place with the skills of that. Like, I'm just not the one who drives, right? Because I'm not the one who did drive. I think it requires of us to think of the relationship as a team, and then look at it, see if we can develop the skill to look at it objectively and go, well, is my lack of ability in that skill actually really hurting the relationship? Not necessarily you versus me, and because then we can pull that, but is it hurting the relationship? And I think if it net is hurting the relationship, that's where we step up for the relationship, right? Because the relationship needs to thrive, and we both have a duty of care for the relationship. And I think that's a better way of looking at it, because her always having to drive long term was never ever going to work. It's never going to work, right? We never can live in the middle of the countryside in Mallorca because Alessandro didn't want to drive. Like, so if we find the perfect house and she's 9 months pregnant, Alessandro, I mean, it's good. I've been driving for years now, but I think you know what I mean. Like, you got to think of the relationship. And I think men specifically, I don't know why, and I'm sure it happens on women, but we're speaking from men experience, but men can just get caught on that conveyor belt for a little too long where they're not actually thinking ahead. And when women are researching, they are thinking ahead. They are thinking in 5 years' time, if this fucker's still not driving, then like, I won't be able to give birth in the middle of the countryside, so we have to live in a stupid place that's going to be loud, and I don't like to be there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They think like that. But I think that's the research that goes into that. That's the forward thinking. And there is some questionable research on forward thinking. I mean, I've read some research on how it's perceived that sometimes women have up to 15 times or 14 to 15 times more forethought than men. But that's not a confirmed study. But when I look at that, I see that over and over again. I just think the ability to step away from it and go, let me try and think ahead as well. See if I can sort out for the relationship is a really useful tool.
That really makes me think, someone I'm talking to at the moment, Laura Danger, who wrote a book called No More Mediocre, about a lot of the things that we're talking about men, women just not accepting mediocre men. But she was saying to me, you've got to understand that the world is an inherently more dangerous place for us. And we have this thing where men are the risk takers. Every day is risky for me in a way that it isn't for you. And I'm sure if that forethought thing is true, that is why. Because you need to be thinking in a way that we are privileged enough to not have to, because the world just isn't as dangerous.
Which actually, I think it's a superpower to some degree, you know, after a while, because as society catches up, you know, it's really good to be like that. But I think that the costs for the world that we live in, we don't understand as men. You're 100% right, and it's something you and I are learning.
Yes.
You and I are learning. We can sit here until the cows come home and say that we understand it now. We still don't.
No, we don't. It's very much a work in progress.
But going back to the point of shame, and this is something I really loved that you've started up with shame here. And I wanted to see what you believe of this. And when we get to that, I truly believe for all of us men, like a good goal for us is to learn as much as we can and be aware, and then judge ourselves on what we do going forward. Because we're never going to know the feminine experience fully, but we can do our best to understand it each day. That's my message that I'm taking away from this. What are you taking away from today's conversation?
What you just said there, you said to me at the beginning, where you were like, you know, you're still carrying this incredible raw change about something that you can't change, raw shame around something you can't change. And the way you just spoke there, it just made me think that maybe one of the best things that's happened to me as a father is that I've cultivated a really great voice with my kids. I don't speak to them like children. I've never spoken to them like children, but I'm gentle and I'm understanding, and I really, really try and see the world from their point of view and encourage them, and I really, really try and not shame them. And you know what I just hit me then is that's the voice I need to use with myself.
It is. It's beautiful, man.
Thank you, buddy. That was really amazing. I really love that.
It's the voice you got to use for yourself. Well, you know the answers. It's the reason why I wear this top almost all the time. Path is within. We all have our own answers within. What's one last thing you'd like to share with the audience before we jump off?
I think, you know, if you're a dad or a dad-to-be, one of the great things you can understand is that all the child development stuff that your wife is throwing herself into doesn't really care about her or her capacity, and they don't know your child. So studies are great and information is great, but the biggest predictor of a thriving, healthy child is the mental health of the mother. And you are in a wonderful position to make sure that she's looked after and that she's thinking of herself, because there'll be people telling her that she should stay awake all hours every night to feed that child on demand, that she should be doing all kinds of things which actually might be quite harmful for her. But you can gently step in and say, it's okay for us to think about you. And I wish someone had told me that.
It's beautiful. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on, Alex. How would you like people to find you? How would you like people?
Come and find me on Instagram at Be a Happier Parent, or check out my podcast app, which is also called Be a Happier Parent. And my two main channels.
Incredible.
Thank you, mate.
Maybe when I'm a parent in the future, at some point, I can jump on there.
I'm so excited for you. I'm so excited for you. You're going to be amazing.
It's going to be fun. That's the episode. That's all I got for you today. I just want you to remember you're not alone in this. Make sure you subscribe to stay connected, of course, and comment your win, because every time a man sees other men winning, they don't feel alone anymore, and I love that. Tools are in the show notes, starting with the Better Husband in 2-minute emails. Let's build this together. I'll see you next week.